So hi Sadhana, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm good, Edmund. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Could you start off by telling us a little bit about your background in the Australian real estate industry and what it is that REIP does?
I'll start with my background first. So I joined the real estate industry when I was 19. I've been in it for a very long time, started as a receptionist and have basically worked my way through the ranks as such to where I am today, which is the CEO of REIP. I am one of a handful of female leaders in our industry in Australia, which I think might be surprising for some of your international listeners. And I balance my time and my space between working in the real estate sector and working in corporate Australia around the issue of diversity and inclusion, which we have a long way to go in that journey. In terms of REIP, Real Estate Industry Partners, we're a collective of leaders who have come together to ensure the ongoing relevance and success and strength of the real estate industry. We are at the moment building an ecosystem of products and services for our members, and we have in place a very strong selection criteria for that. As you know, technology stack these days, there's a new piece of technology that comes out pretty much every day. All of our profits are put back into REIP for the benefit of our members. Membership is free. To become a member, all we need you to do is put your listings onto our portal, the REIP portal, and that makes you a member.
Okay, so for our viewers who are fairly international, could you tell us a little bit about the Australian real estate ecosystem, which maybe differs from other countries? And what I'm kind of getting at here is, I actually recently did some research for a piece that I wrote, and I was quite surprised to see how much money Australian portals make per transaction. And it seems to me that there's a reason for this, because it's kind of different from other markets.
It is. And look, I don't know whether we run an older traditional model, but the ecosystem in Australia is more around the agents work for brands. So they're not necessarily independent and working for themselves. They work for brands. They may have an independent business within a business, but it's usually in a brand. Their clients pay for all of the marketing. So that includes the portal fees, the boards, the digital paper advertising, anything else that they do. And you're right, Australian portals are not cheap. I think, in fact, in one of your articles, you wrote, we are one of the most expensive in the world, which I can't get my head around why that is. And our prices go up yearly in comparison to what I'm paying for. You know, if my prices may go up 10 or 15% per year, yet the improvements on the site don't necessarily stack up. The other issue is that the amount of money I pay to a portal for my marketing and advertising to be on there may not necessarily relate to the return of the investment that I get. So I could pay $10,000 for a 4-week campaign and have 300 people a weekend click onto the ad, but only 50 turn up. Now, when we give feedback to a client, we say, 50 people turn up to your open. That was a great result, but was it when 300 people clicked on the ad? So the conversion, I don't believe traditional portals give you the best conversion. And I think, we've got to a point in time where we probably need to look at other alternatives, whether it's just in Australia or globally, than traditional portals provide.
Okay, so you kind of touched on it there. My next question is, what are some of the big issues in the industry at the moment, particularly facing agents?
Some of the big issues that we are facing here at the moment is the technology. Particularly since COVID-19, we were forced to take some serious steps onto digital platforms, which we did really, really well. We've also seen an increase in the prop tech space with many great products coming to market, but often only solving a siloed issue. So it's a noisy space. One of the challenges we continue to have and face is that we don't have, as a business, we don't have a universal view of the client. So each of the products that we use to run our business interact with the clients in different ways, but they don't talk to each other, so we don't get a universal view. But we also have to pay fees for each one of these products. And so I'm working in a world where my profits in a business are being eroded all the time. And then on the flip side, we have our fees that are constantly under pressure. So the pressure is a mix of lower fee agencies, the people who deliberately go up the market and reduce their fees. And on the other side, if my marketing costs are going up every single year, the only thing I've got left to negotiate as an agent is my fees. So I'm constantly having pressure on my fees. And they're probably some of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now.
Okay, you mentioned a bit about technology there and how agents have had to kind of embrace the technology much more in the last 12 months than maybe they had before. I mean, when I first started the job about a year ago, there were so many articles coming out just saying how agencies and agents in particular are very maybe quite backwards, kind of Luddites, all kinds of opinion pieces like that. You seem like somebody who's in a position to say, no, that's not true. What has your experience been over the last, particularly in the last 12 months, of agents adopting digitalization?
It's such a hard English word, isn't it? Luddites. I love it, but it is so harsh. Look, I think most businesses were pretty quick and agile to change onto virtual and digital platforms. And what we saw in Australia here was businesses really engaging on online auctions, virtual auctions, online inspections, contactless move-ins and move-outs. I think as a whole, as an industry, we did really well. Did COVID force us all to move in a direction a lot faster than what we would have done if COVID didn't hit? Yes, absolutely. But I think, credit where credit is due, the industry moved and pivoted really, really fast.
Okay, so it's not fair. All of those opinion pieces I read were perhaps not fair.
I think it's a little bit harsh. Yeah.
Fair enough. So moving back to talking about property portals, I saw a comment on REIP's homepage from a stakeholder, which, let's be honest, is having a pop at property portals. And to me, it sounded like it was having a pop at one particular property portal. Broadly speaking, how is the relationship between portals and agents in Australia?
This is a really interesting question. And I think my answer will be perhaps a little bit controversial. There is a high level of dependency on portals in Australia. They tend to feed agents leads from listings that they have loaded onto the portals. And what I would like to see is a world where we reduce the reliance agents have on portals, and we also reduce the cost to the client for advertising their property. And I think if we can do those two things, then the reliance on property portal by agents reduces. From what I see is we are feeding and creating a beast that's going to get bigger and bigger, and the danger we have is around monopoly. In any industry, if you have a monopoly, it doesn't end well. And that is what we need to avoid. But also, I think the industry has to step up and have an opportunity to actually manage, control data that belongs to them. Gone are the days, I think, or we need to work away from the days where I feed my data up to the portal then analyzes the data and feeds back leads to me, which I then pay for to sell or for a buyer. And I think that world needs to change.
Okay, I'm interested, you mentioned at the start, and we kind of touched on it, in Australia, the vendor is ultimately responsible for the property portal fees, right? Which is different to how it works in other countries. Do you ever get, do agents ever get pushback from vendors, or are vendors usually quite happy to pay these fees? Because I guess you're not selling a house every week, so you're not really aware of how much the prices are going up relative to other things.
That's right. And I think, there are various marketing packages on the market, and quite often the vendors will then, assess what can I afford? Do I have to pay for it now? Can I pay it later? And in this space now, interesting you asked this question, because we've had a huge rise in the buy now, pay later products in the market. And they are coming up because a lot of vendors now want to be able to push back that marketing cost, spend slightly higher, but push it back. And the buy now, pay later products allow them to do that.
Okay. So interesting that you mentioned before REIP actually has its own property portal. Firstly, how is the property portal going? And secondly, so I see some parallels here with, there's a couple of estate agency groups in the UK that have launched kind of their own property portals. Obviously the MLS system in America is, broadly speaking, similar as well. How much of an impact can REIP and I guess these other ways of doing portals really have on these big businesses?
Look, I think what the level of impact we can have is perhaps one that we will see as we move into the future. I haven't got a crystal ball to predict that. The REIP portal is a member site. We are not consumer based or facing, so we don't do all the bells and whistles. We're primarily there to aggregate data to various partners. So when you load your listings onto the REIP portal, we then aggregate it out to On the House, Realty, Sorted, a whole bunch of other partners that we have. We currently have just over 50% of the market listings, and as I said, there's no cost to become an REIP member. I think the second half of your question is, we do need to have an industry site, whether it's a portal, whatever that looks like, that is supported by agents and is supported by the industry. Because I think the long-term impact on, we need to control our data, control our leads, reduce the advertising spend for our clients, that will only happen if the industry has a focus on that, not independent, privately owned businesses.
Okay, so you mentioned there that you have about 50% of the market. I'm sure there's a lot of, maybe perhaps not in Australia, but in other markets, there's probably a lot of challenger property portals that would love to have 50% of the market. And you also said, you're, at the moment, you're not really consumer facing. I guess the question is, why not? And would you ever want to be a consumer facing property portal? I guess you'd have to spend a lot of money to do so, but would there ever be plans to do that?
Absolutely. We'd be silly not to. So yes, there are plans to do that, and we will be consumer facing. We just don't, I think to replicate what portals are doing in the marketplace is just silly. It's crazy. I don't want to be another Me Too. What we want to do is go to the market with a unique proposition for our agents, for our businesses, for our clients, that we know is going to be different enough for us to serve everybody in the marketplace.
Okay. So a question that I've always been kind of interested in since I started in this job is that I obviously read a lot of news from all around the world, and there seems to be a lot of parallels. So what's happening in the US seems to be what's happening broadly in the UK and Australia. But also the real estate industry in these markets is kind of insular, kind of necessarily. I mean, if you're an agent in Australia, you don't necessarily need to pay attention to what's going on in America. The question is, do agents, let's say in Australia, pay attention to these narratives of what's happening in America with Zillow, or in the UK with Rightmove? Because it seems very similar to me to what's happening with REA Group in Australia.
Yeah, and look, again, good question. And I think there are some agents who, yes, definitely pay attention. They're across what's happening in the UK, in South Africa, in the USA, in China, in Russia. All of these places, they're across it. But I have to be honest with you, for most agents, their interest is, where do I get my next listing from? Where do I get my next sale from? They are very much focused on what's going to grow their business and put food on the table for them. So, does that make us a little bit insular? Maybe, perhaps, but I think the industry leaders are the ones who need to be focused on what is happening externally outside of Australia. And I think we have good leadership in this country that is doing that. And then we feed it down the line as such.
Okay, well answered, I have to say. My last question that I ask pretty much everyone when I talk to them is, obviously we've just had 12 months which nobody could have predicted. So I'm going to give you a horrible question and ask you to predict the next 12 to 18 months. How do you see it going? And specifically, I'm trying to get out the digitalization of what it is that agents do.
Yeah, and look, I think the new normal, which is the term we would like to use globally, it is going to be an interesting one, because I think it's what you want it to be. However, having said that, going back to how we did business in Australia, was the 14th of March. It's kind of when our world changed here. We won't go back to that. We have to digitize our businesses. We have to assess how people want to work. The new world of working isn't like it used to be. Flexible hours, reducing the work people in actual physical offices means that we probably will be reducing physical space. So what does that mean to the corner store, real estate agency? Then you add on top of that what our consumers are chasing: faster, better, cheaper. How does that work? We've got so many pieces of technology. How are they going to work together versus in our business? Do I actually get to see one view of the client? But I think most importantly, how do we hold or increase our fees and reduce the turnover costs for our clients? Because that, to me, is a world we need to be moving into. And I think technology plays a huge part of that. automation, AI, scalability, efficiency. These are all the things we need to be working towards in our industry.
Okay, perfect. Look at that. Bang on 15 minutes. You've been
Bang on 15 minutes.
Yeah. Sadhana, it's been really nice talking to you. And you've been such a good guest. I'm more than happy to let you plug your podcast, which I listened to the first episode of the other day and really liked. Tell our audience all about it.
Well, I have to say, Edmund was able to listen to the podcast and pronounce my name correctly. So well done. But the podcast, I've actually got two podcasts. The first one is REIP Insights, which gives us insights into the Australian marketplace every month. And the second one is Business in Colour podcast, where we talk to some amazing Australian leaders and international leaders on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Thank you for letting me plug that.
No problem. Happy to talk. Nice one. Thank you, Sadhana.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.